Hey team, welcome back to the Dentistry Invest podcast. I wish and hope that everybody is having a flippin' lovely day wherever you are in the world. Here I have today a different podcast because it's a little bit of a thoughtful podcast. It is a reflective podcast where myself and Dr. Bill Kellner-Read will be discussing wealth, but in the rearview mirror, and the things that we wish we would have known a long time ago. Like if we could go back and talk to that avatar of ourselves once upon a time, many moons ago, and put a hand on our shoulder and say, hey, this is going to happen. What you should do is this. Here's how you avoid it. That's who this podcast is addressed to, basically. And there'll be things in there that people in the audience will be like, oh my God, that's me. And maybe there'll be other parts that less so. It's a very personal podcast because it's more a direct message to James and I'm sure a direct message to a previous version of Bill as well from many moons ago. And within that, there'll be knowledge and things to learn. Bill, first of all, pleasure to have you on board. And would you say that that's an apt description for what we're about to discuss?
Yeah, I think it's really great to be here. As we said just earlier on, it's nearly the middle of the night where I am right now. For those who'd like to know, I'm just outside Brisbane in Australia, and it's the middle of the night, and it's still warm enough to be just in a jumper, so we're all good. Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. That life through the rearview mirror. Wouldn't it be nice? Wouldn't it be really great if you could actually do that? You know, look in that mirror, go back in time and go, oh, I'll change this, I'll change that, and so on. And interestingly enough, you know, you talked earlier on about, you know, some of the challenges that you faced, James, when, you know, in making some of the decisions that you've had to make. And in the last couple of weeks, I've spoken to 4 or 5 practitioners, not all dentists, who have hit brick walls, none of their own making. I met a physio with bilateral carpal tunnel and just had an operation on both hands, or both wrists, should I say. A podiatrist who's just damaged her finger, and so she can't work. A chiropractor who's got his injured his back so badly he can't work. Another physio who's hurt her hip and she can't work. And a good friend of mine who a young dentist who has struggled with some mental health issues. So it's nice to be able to talk about these things nowadays. He didn't talk about these things 50 years ago. But, you know, he's had to take some time off because of some of the pressures that we face in practice. Actually, for him, not through the actual work, but through wanting to move on to another practice and some of the difficulties that young practitioners, I think all of us have when we decide to move. You know, we're an associate somewhere, we decide to get up and go. And sometimes the understanding isn't always the way you'd like it to be. Sometimes the moving on isn't quite as easy as you'd like it to be. And certainly for him, it was very difficult. So, but the point of what I was saying there is, you know, when you're looking at, and obviously you're aimed very much at finance, is how do you shore up for those rainy days? I mean, sure, you can have, you know, you can have your insurance policies to make sure you got sickness benefit and so on and so forth. But how is it that you make sure that if you couldn't practice tomorrow, what would you do instead? You know, how do you plan now for something that may never happen, but on the other hand, it could?
That's beautiful. Were you finished then? Because I have something to add to that. Because if you
Sure.
think, were you finished? Yeah?
Mhm.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
here's the thing: the sickness cover and all of that. They're the obvious things, right? Are you with me? Yeah. What about we think beyond that a little bit and think to ourselves, okay, what is the plan B? What is the thing that I could do that would bring me fulfillment and joy and bring some income as well, right? That is within dentistry, within the field of dentistry, but not actually clinical dentistry or something beyond that, right? What seeds can we plant beyond the obvious thing of just taking out an insurance policy, right? So here's the thing. This happened to me because I found myself in a position where I couldn't practice dentistry for 3 months because I had knee surgery. I had an ACL operation. I couldn't walk, right? Now, at the time, I didn't really have the wisdom to realize that actually I'd planted the seeds for myself for a plan B if I find myself in such a position many moons before that, because I had this hobby around this field which was tied to dentistry, which was helpful for dentists to know. However, I'd never really actually put two and two together and realized that this might be of value to someone else. And it was only through the flipping wonders of social media, and it is a wonderful thing when you use it correctly, in my opinion, that I found out that actually other people found value in the things I learned. And of course, right, as soon as you can generate value for someone else, you can make a community and you can potentially be remunerated for that, should you decide to formalize the content and information that you're giving people via the means of courses, or however you decide to do it, right? But that's just one example, right? So I think for me, the first seed that you can plant is get yourself a body of knowledge in a different field, not even necessarily related to dentists, or not even necessarily something that dentists would find useful themselves, because you don't have to go down that path. But if you can have a body of knowledge in something that can help dentists, then you can speak to that tribe or community of dentists like no one else can, because you literally walked in those shoes and you were that person. Therefore, the perspective that you bring to that new body of information will be really valuable to that people. Anyway.
Brilliant, absolutely. And you see, it's so right. You know, when you look at it, let me step you forward quite a few years from where you are right now, James. Let me step you forward to the day that I retired, which is just a year ago now, almost to the day a year ago that I retired. And it's just to give you all the heads up on what retirement really means. Well, you can sit back and you can find a rocking chair and go and sit in the front porch and wait for the Grim Reaper to come. Or you can think, no, I still want to be doing something. Now, like most things in life, it didn't occur to me to really research retirement until it happened. I had researched it a little bit because I wanted to, I was looking at other things that I wanted to do. But basically, what I found when I retired, and then when I looked at the research on retirement, I found that many people who retire, actually the thing that they miss most is meaning in their life, is significance into what they want to do. Where they're going to go from here. You think about if you were to stay in any career, not just dentistry, but any career, and you do 45 years as I've just done, you do 45 years and you have meaning every day. Every day, you know what you're going to do. You go in, you do your work, you drill your teeth, do whatever it happens to be, and you come home and you've had a whole day of meaning. You've changed somebody's life, you've got them out of pain, you've made them look better, whatever it's done within dentistry, you've made a difference. And then from one day to the next, it's gone. And you go through this interesting time when you think, what do I do now? I mean, my life doesn't have that meaning. You say, well, spend time with my wife, with my grandchildren, so on and so forth. Yeah, but what about that thing that grabs you? Now, and that's where you can get after all these years in dentistry to that point. And that's so important when you look back, because what actually you find through life is that meaning or significance changes over time. So what happens is you come into dentistry, you spend the first 2 or 3 years thinking, I don't know anything. Well, you spend your first year knowing everything. Second and third year, you don't know very much. And then you really wonder what on earth you're doing in the whole career profession all the way, from there on. And then you build and you build and you grow and you do all the things that we all do in dentistry until you, for many of us, get to the stage. So I'm now shifting you on about 10 years, James, in dentistry now. You get to that point when you get to around about the age of 40 and you think, this is driving me crazy. What am I doing this for? It's just hard work. The patients don't seem to be grateful. Nothing's really going in the direction I want it to go. What's happening here? And then you have to take stock. Now, I actually took stock earlier in my career than that, but there comes a time when you really have to sit yourself down and say, what do I want out of this? And you did that early, James. You did that really early, but it's so important that you get to that point where you go, what am I going to get out of this? Then you have all the fear that rushes in, because let's say you're at 35, let's say you're 40, and you're married, you've got the kids, you've got the school fees, you've got the mortgage, you've got the cars, you've got the practice, you've got the whole thing, and it all rests on you. Nobody else. It all rests on you. And you think, oh, I don't know that I'm enjoying this that much anymore. Now, you have a choice at that point. You either niche your practice down, find something that's really, and you talked about this, James, because I read that you did this, but you niche your practice down and do what you really love to do in practice, but then you need to find something outside that you can also do. And the answer to the reason for you doing that, and as you said, we talked about this earlier on, is you can then find something else that you'd like to do. And then when you want to move, you can elegantly exit from one thing to the other, rather than going, I don't know what to do now. I can't stand this anymore. And when you look at practitioners, patients too, I mean, I'll tell you a little bit about my background in dentistry in a minute, but when you look at your patients and you look at yourself and you think, oh gosh, I think I'm going into burnout. Now, burnout wasn't a thing when I qualified. We didn't have burnout yet. It hadn't happened. Of course, it had happened. People were having burnout all the time, but we didn't have a name for it, and the name came along quite a lot later on. But you see people in burnout, and I remember so clearly a good colleague of mine burning out. He was young practitioner, and just got to the point where it was too much, and he just couldn't turn up for work. So we don't expect these things to happen. You don't expect to have a knee operation at your age. That wasn't on the cards. This physio wasn't expecting to have bilateral carpal tunnel. She wasn't expecting that. So there are these unexpected things that we think we're invincible till the moment we're not. And the moment we find out we're not invincible is when we hit the panic buttons. We go, I rely on myself. I'm a sole practitioner. If you've read, I don't know whether you've read Rich Dad Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki's book.
You know what, right? Actually, interestingly, I have it over there on the bookshelf. I have read most of it. I think that's the one book on finance that really raves about that I actually haven't got around to reading fully yet. But great book. The one part that I do know from it is the quadrant
Yeah,
versus
yeah,
owner versus what is it, employee, I believe.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And if you look at that, I should have a slide presentation here. But if you look at that, we often think of ourselves as sole practitioners or as self-employed. We're self-employed. No, we actually just bought a job. We bought a job and we do that job. We sit in that self-employed. Kiyosaki puts you down in the bottom left-hand corner as somebody who's self-employed. The problem with that is that you can never build a mature business. A mature business is a business where you can go away on holiday or you can go away for an extended period of time and the business continues to run itself. Often what we find as practitioners is every time we go on holiday, we then spend the rest of the year earning the money back for the money we spent when we went on that expensive holiday that we really wanted to go on. And let's face it, we like going on expensive holidays. And we earn the money, why shouldn't we go on the holidays? But you go off, you do that, and then you got to earn the money back. Then you get sick, and then you got to earn the money back. And then you got staff problems, and you got to earn the money back. Then you have an associate who doesn't do the job you want them to do, and you've got to redo the work, and you've got to get the money back. And on and on and on it goes. And so if I were talking back to myself, as we said earlier on, James, if I was going back to myself 30 years ago, say, okay, what else have you got in place for that rainy day? What have you got there that if dentistry stopped for you tomorrow, would you have something in place to carry on? Or would the whole thing come down, crashing down? And that's something that I've spent a lot of time looking at, a lot of time studying. And my wife and I, we run a business on the side, or we'd run a business on the side of dentistry that allowed us to do exactly that. And there was a reason. The reason we did it was because we recognized all the things that had happened to me through my practicing career that was not going to allow me to retire with the same amount of money that I was earning while I was in practice.
You know what, right? I think it's something that everybody appreciates and pays lip service to, is owning some sort of asset like that. But like yourself, when I went through that knee thing, I was like, wow, it really is just dangling by a thread whether or not I earn money from my job. Given that as a dentist, right, there's oftentimes no sick pay, right?
Mm.
Yeah. So you have to physically be there. And whilst the money's good, cash flow can be flipping amazing, right? But you can also, the cash flow, what goes in can be great, but the cash flow, what goes out will rise to that inevitably, right? Okay. And yeah, I feel it's about having these conversations. If I could go back and shake myself, right, I would be like, James, why do you have to wait for something like that to happen before you just take measures and take steps to create something that will mean that isn't so much of an issue for you. I think the first thing is to realize, right, that it is possible to do that, because there's lots of people in that boat as well. They don't understand that actually you can create an asset which can give you cash flow, right? It takes a lot of time and a lot of work, don't get me wrong, right? People think that stocks and bonds do that for you. Stocks and bonds don't work like that. You have to let them compound and appreciate exponentially for many years, right? Actually, the one real way that you can do that, well, one real way is business. Okay, that's the main way that you can create real cash flow. The other one that people talk about is property. Yields are about 8-10%. Takes a while to get there, right? Anyway, I know you've got more to say. There was one other thing that I just wanted to touch upon just there, and that is that it's very important that we take accountability personally for all of this stuff rather than outsource it, which is what we often do. Outsource it to a financial advisor to manage our affairs, right? Or outsource it to the indemnity provider for a sickness pay, right? The key thing to understand that is a third party thing, right? They're never going to care about numero uno as much as numero uno is going to care about numero uno. And these are the steps that you can take in order to put things in place. Should that time arise, we can't earn, because being a dentist is being like a flipping footballer. You have to be at the peak of your physical health, right? Okay, at least I think, yeah. And when you take that upon yourself, then you can make something that can sustain you when that arises. And I didn't appreciate that until I went through that.
Yeah. And that unfortunately, look, human nature, isn't it? I mean, human nature, as I said earlier on, we think we're invincible. We think we're going to go on forever. And a lot of us do. But you look at the research, and once again, dentists retire 6 or 7 years later than any other of the professions or any of the other jobs out there. We're all sort of carrying on till we're 70 plus. And I was having a chat with a colleague of mine just recently. He's 69. And he reckons he's got another 5 years or so to go, at least, maybe 10. And I'm thinking, what are you doing? Why would you do that? He said, well, I've still got my health. And I'm thinking, yeah, but I've seen your hands. and his hands are like this, and I'm thinking, I wouldn't let you come at me with anything. And the guy's actually into some stuff, and I'm thinking, oh no, I would, he's into injectables and so on. I think if I saw somebody coming at me with that, and I think, well, no, I'll go somewhere else. Thanks very much. But anyway, it happens, and you've got to keep going at what you are. But yes, it is absolutely right that you look at it and you go, okay, I totally agree with you on you look after numero uno, and I can say that from my point of view, the number of times that I trusted some of the financial advisors and so on, don't necessarily give you the best advice for you. They definitely give you the best advice for them. That was something that I really found out at a very early age, and that continued on. And that was a real issue for me throughout my career. Was at times when I'd pretend that I didn't have the time to actually look at it myself, and so I would find somebody to do something for me, and then I'd go back and have a look at what it is that they got me into, and I realized that I was losing money, but they were fine. And that was one of the things, you look at the way you build your practice, all those sorts of things, and who you employ. And it makes such a big difference when you look at the way you staff your practice, the way you actually run your practice, and what your practice actually means. So one of the things I was talking to, let me come back to something, James, if I may. I talked to you earlier on about a modular course that I'm just about to put out. And what I didn't tell you was the title of the course. I can't remember what the title is. It's something along the lines of interprofessional generosity. And one of the things that I learned early on in my career was the power of working with other people who were not dentists. And I'll come into that in just a moment. But so I was talking with a physiotherapist the other day, and she's Scottish, but she's running 3 large practices here in Australia. And one of the things that we both realized, she's realized a lot earlier than I did in my career, was when an associate comes into your practice, you have a choice. You either go, as much as I do, therefore just go for it and see what you do. Or you say, look, I'd like to show you how I run my practice. And this is what I do. And this is what I would expect you to be able to do as well. I won't take away your clinical freedom. But what I want to make sure is that if we're going to run this practice together, we're on the same page. And she'd found exactly the same thing, that she had brought in slightly more experienced physiotherapists and found that they wanted to do it their way. And I've done that as well, because I've been an associate when I got older. And honestly, I was a nightmare for the people who I worked for. I was called all sorts of things. But disruptor was the word, the name that I was called. Because I go into somebody's practice and I disrupt it, because they say, well, I can see what you're doing, but how about we do that in a slightly but more efficient way? Didn't go down
When
very
you've
well.
got that energy, it's hard to not be like that though. Like when and it's an individual thing, and I vibe with that. Let's just say that. Let's just leave it
Yeah,
there. I'm
it,
like
it
that as well. I find it hard to not tinker.
it is a difficult one. So coming back to the run to this modular course that I've done, it was really I was looking back at my career. Where how did I move from NHS to private? And I did it back in 1984, 85, somewhere around about that time, which is quite a long time ago, and a time when there was a real distinction between NHS and private. You really had to look at, you're going to do one or the other. If you mix them, then you're out the door. You were kicked out because you couldn't mix the two at all. And so you had to find ways of actually going into private practice. And what I did was and at this time, James, I was about to give up dentistry altogether. I was going to go and become a pilot. And I'd already got, I had my pilot's license, and I was going to go off and I was going to teach people to fly until I got enough hours up to go and do my CPL, ATPL, and become an airline pilot. And I went down and I met a dentist down on the South Coast, and I said, "This is what I'm going to do." And he said, "Before you do that, why don't you go on a course?" I said, "Well, I don't want to. I'm done with dentistry. We're done." He said, "Go on a course." And he actually he said, "Look, go on a course with these guys." And off I went on this course. And here I was, basically as miserable as sin in dentistry by this time. And there are all these happy dentists. And I thought, what's wrong with these people? They just got to have lost the plot altogether. And they were enjoying what they were doing. And I thought, I want some of this. Whatever they're on, I want some of it. And so, and this was oddly enough, not that I agree with everything they do, but just go with this for the moment. I headed off from there to the Pankey Institute in America, and did the first continuum with the Pankey on TMJ and so on and so forth. And at the same time as I went to the Pankey, I was also introduced to Harold Gelb. And it was amazing because Harold Gelb he looked like Kojak. He comes from New York. And Harold Gelb taught TMJ diametrically opposed to what the Pankey were teaching. So I got these two completely different aspects of TMJ and so on and so forth within months of each other. And it was fascinating because here I was sitting in the middle going, do I go left? Do I go right? Or how about I amalgamate everything I've learned here and move in that direction? And so I did. And so I spent most of my career doing general dentistry, but also treating head, neck, and back pain of dental origin. So that opened a whole load of different doors. So when I went into the private sector, what I did was, first of all, I went in, not a lot of people were doing TMJ work then, and there's still not a lot of them. Not, in my opinion, every dentist should have a really, really good understanding of the whole thing, but I know that that's not the case. I know it's not, I don't know whether it's taught in the UK now, but it's certainly not, no.
No.
And it's not taught here in Australia either.
Yeah.
And so here I was able to go into private practice and say, I mean, I was very young in the game, but somebody would come in and they say, "Oh, I've got a dreadful headache." And I said, I can help you with that. And they go, "Really?" "Yeah."
Very
And
cool.
and you go, "I can help you with that." And they go, "I get this really bad neck pain. I can help you with that." And it was always, "I can help you with that." And I realized very quickly that I could help some, I couldn't help them all. And so the interprofessional generosity was when I went out and started to network with osteopaths, physiotherapists, chiropractors, naturopaths, massage therapists, and the list goes on and on. And what I found was that I had found my own referral base without really having to advertise. You weren't allowed to advertise back then, by the way. We didn't have any advertising, just the plate on the wall. But I was able to build my practice based on this interreferral. So I would have patients who come in to see me, and I think, I don't know what to do here. I send them down to the osteopath. The osteopath would say, yeah, I can do this. Can you do that? And I say, yes, I can do this. And so we built a relationship. And here we were here I was very early on in the piece, actually making my money in the private sector by offering a service alongside my normal general practice work that helped patients with the head, neck, and back pain, and all sorts of other conditions that I got to learn about as I went through my career. So that's me in dentistry, and what it did, because as I said, I was about to give up the whole thing. And rather than give up dentistry at that time, I found this passion. So we talk about meaning and significance. I talk a lot. I have actually, it's over there. I've just finished writing a book called The More, which is all about finding that significant contribution that you want to make in your life. It goes beyond purpose, and the book is all about how you get there. So it's just a fictitious story, but also has a lot more to it. But the point about this was that back then it gave me a real meaning to dentistry for me. It wasn't necessarily all mainstream, but it meant something to me. When somebody came in and they had a headache, and I said, look, let me help you with that headache today. And they go, thank you very much indeed. And it was amazing to be able to do that and be so passionate and so drawn in by just one aspect of dentistry. You know, and that took me through some really tough times, because I had some pretty tough times through my career. I made some very interesting decisions. Just to put you in the picture, I've had practices in Austria, in England, and in Australia. You want to make life difficult? And that's another piece of that wisdom package, by the way. If you want to make life easy in dentistry, stay in the same place.
Wait, that wasn't all simultaneously though, was it? There was a different
No,
period.
no, no, no. No,
Okay.
England and Austria, I ran at the same time.
Wow.
Yeah,
Well, yeah, and
yeah.
regardless simultaneous or not, there's still quite some achievement. It's
It
interesting.
was crazy. I mean, thank goodness for Ryanair. That's all I can say at that time. I was flitting back
That's
between
nice.
Austria and England with Ryanair until they stopped flying into the airport where I was working from. So that on a serious note, I mean, I think that when you look at dentistry, and you obviously did, James, when you got to that point, you look at it and go, can I stay here for the rest of my life? Because if you really want to make a very good living and build all the other aspects of life that you want, you need to know that you're prepared to do that. And if you do that, go on, go on.
No, all I was going to say, there was one more. I thought you were finished just then. There's one thing you were going to say, and then I've got something to add to that.
Okay, just before you do, what I wanted to say was, and these are all the things that you learn as you go along. And as I said, things that I love talking about from the stage as well. But one of the other things that really was such a powerful part of my practicing life was when I learned about the personalities. When I learned there are different personalities, we are not all built the same. And that was so powerful for me as a practitioner, because I thought, oh, okay, so I just don't happen to be one of these people who can sit in the same room for 8 hours a day, every day of the week with no window. Couldn't do it. It drove me demented. And I had to realize that for me, if you put me in a practice without a window, you might as well shoot me in the head. I need a window, or I need to be able to move. I need the flexibility. There are all sorts of things that you find out about yourself. But the other thing about personalities, I won't go into the details now, but the other thing about understanding the personalities is that you get to understand your patients. You get to understand the different way of approaching a patient just based on their personality. And that's so powerful and so important, because it allows patients to really believe in you. Yeah.
I went through this. I've got something else to say, but just to add further to to that thing that you just said just now, right? I remember having that epiphany when I was 28, and I was like, "Whoa! Not everybody wants me to come in and be like, hey, I'm here, I'm your dentist, high energy, all that stuff." And people
Mm.
want to be presented to in a more meek fashion, speak a little
Yeah.
softer, more submissive body language, all of those things. I remember having that epiphany. And that's actually a lifelong process, isn't it? To be able to adapt who you are to the person that you're interacting with. Yeah, as a dentist, the way you will best interact with your patients is where you wear slightly different masks for every single one of them, and you match your energy. That's what I found. I thought my naivety before that point was, okay, what is the perfect personality? Okay, right? What is the one that's going to hit with every single patient, right? Now, maybe if you're on a stage or something, you have to pick one thing and roll with it, right? But when it's one-to-one, you adapt, right? And again, that sounds kind of obvious, right? But actually, there's a subtle amount of huge nuance to that. And appreciating it as a thing is the first step to engaging better with your patients and also having more fulfillment out of the job as well. Anyway,
Absolutely.
you've heard about the disc system, the red, yellow, blue, green.
Yeah.
So yellow for me, I would say yellow, right? But obviously it's down to the individuals. It's subjective, down to other people's perception of it. But I would say yellow, right? So yellows and reds, the red being the more assertive individual, maybe more businesslike, not as warm. Okay. Reds find yellows irritating, okay, because they're too high energy, right? They just want you to get to the point, right? And I used to get these patients and I used to be like, what was their problem? Right?
Yeah.
But really, they were just reflecting my energy. That's what I didn't realize, okay?
Yeah.
They wanted me to interact with them in a different way. All right, of course, there's some people who that's not possible for always, but you get better at it through that system. But anyway, the other thing I was going to say is when it comes to happiness, okay, so let's say I look back on my career when I was in clinical dentistry, and dentistry for me was always 8 out of 10 in terms of fulfillment, right? So 8 out of 10 was just enough to keep me comfortable that I would keep doing that job, right? Because I thought 8 out of 10, well, that's fine, right? That's as good as it gets for a career, right? Now, 8 out of 10, right? Really, you want a 10 out of 10 life, right? Because we only have one opportunity on this earth, right? But if we accept something that is not 10 out of 10, then to a greater or lesser degree, it's a compromise, right? But I didn't want to risk the 8 out of 10 for a 3 out of 10 or a 4 out of 10 or whatever, right? But here's what I didn't grasp. I thought it was all or nothing, right? And actually, you can use your happiness as a kind of dowsing rod to find what you like, right? And here's why, right? You've heard of dowsing rods, those semi-mystical kind of metal rods that you hold in your hand, and they when they align, they lead you towards water. It's pseudoscience, I believe, isn't it? But anyway, I think it is. Anyway, I'm pretty sure it's pseudoscience. Anyway,
it works.
It works. Does it work? Okay. Okay. I don't know. I got my disclaimer just in there, just in time. Yeah, I don't really know much about them, but I know of dowsing rods. Anyway. Okay, cool. So let's say you use your own happiness as a dowsing rod to find the thing that makes you more happy. And what do I mean by that, right? It's literally as simple as if you find something and you enjoy it, right? Just follow your curiosity and see what happens. It's as simple as that, right? And when you proceed down that path of undertaking that activity more, getting more exposure to that thing, then you'll find out if you actually do enjoy it, right? But you'll never actually have that question answered unless you proceed down that path and satisfy your curiosity, satisfy your intrigue, satisfy that childlike curiosity inside you to go and find that thing and explore it, right? Because here's the thing, that's where the 10 out of 10 could lie. And you can keep your 8 out of 10 the whole time, which is dentistry. You can keep your 7 out of 10, whatever, right? But here's the thing, the stakes are actually subtly really high, okay? Because what we like to do as human beings is accept comfort and just do the same thing, right? And hope something will change, right? Actually, it's an active process. Your own happiness and what you enjoy, that can be your dowsing rod effectively, okay? You let it align, you follow it. If it works out, it works out. Okay, if it doesn't work out, no big deal. Your dowsing rods will find something else at some point. You know what I mean? But the key thing is to be open to it. That's the point that I'm making.
I think that's absolutely right. I think I would, I think as I said earlier on, one of the things that happens, we pursue a course that you pursued yours for a fairly short period of time, and you were able to make that change. And you're about the same age that I would have gone off and become an airline pilot, by the way. So that was that, that's sort of how the whole thing sets together. And probably people who are listening to this will go, hang on a minute, yeah, I've been in practice for what, 4 or 5 years. Yeah, I don't like it anymore. What can I do? And what I realized at that time was I prepared to give up this education that I had, or was I prepared to look deeper into it? And my choice was to look deeper into it. Now, that's fine, and it's not fine. Do I wish that I had gone off and been an airline pilot? Well, yes, in a way. And in fact, I was flying back with Ryanair from Austria one time, and I sat with the captain. I don't know why he wasn't up the front of the plane, but he sat next to me and we had a chat.
Who was at the front?
Yeah, he said, you could have done dentistry part-time and been a pilot part-time. I thought, well, I didn't think about that, but actually Ryanair wasn't around when, and I could have done both. And I think that oftentimes, that's not a compromise. That's also, you look at what you do within your career. You've chosen this career. If you hate it, stop doing it. Absolutely. If you don't like it, if you don't think it's for you, stop doing it. Don't think I'll make it through 40 years, because what you'll do, trust me on this one, is you will look back and you'll go, what was all that about? Life goes so very quickly. I look back, I still think I'm the same age as you are, James, by the way, just in case I don't look it, I know that. And I
I
probably
still
don't
think
feel
I'm
it.
16, so I'm familiar with that effect. I
Well, there
relate.
you are. And unfortunately, and especially as, we don't grow up, especially as men, but, you look back and you go, what did I really achieve over all that period of time? And as I said, one of the things that you can do, rather than, especially if you get to 40, I use the age 40 because just for me, the wheels fell off at the age of 40, big time. If you're not a believer in the midlife crisis, it is a real thing. And does it happen? Absolutely. Not to everybody, but to a lot of people. And that's not really the best time to be wanting to go off and find yourself. Because it's the time when you've done all the things to set your life up for the rest of your life. You've got the house, you've got the cars, you've got all those things, and then you hit the midlife crisis. And that's another conversation for another day. But point being that at that time, you find a different interest and you niche. I'm a great believer in niching. By the time you're 35, 40, you know enough about your career to know which bit of it, without becoming a specialist, which bit of it you really enjoy and really want to spend time in. So you do that, and then you say, what else can I do to bring me in some income? And I'm working with these injured people at the moment, because they can't work. And I'm saying, okay, fine, let's look at what we're doing in our company business, and how we're supplementing our income, how you can supplement your income, but keep doing what you also want to do as a career. What I call that, just so that you have an idea that these things do have a name for me, it's what I call a supporting purpose business. So if you come outside dentistry just for a moment, and you take somebody like a massage therapist, and I love massage therapists. I think they do a great job, but their life expectancy as a therapist is 10, 15 years, because their hands wear out, everything wears out. But they're passionate about what they do. The problem with that is that they don't ever earn enough money to completely support themselves. So what you do is say, okay, fine, do that amount of work, niche that, and let's give you a supporting purpose business, something that you can do that will support that endeavor, so you don't overshoot and end up with nothing. Let's pull it all back into the middle. So you have the two sides of that going on at the same time. And I think as I look back over it, and look, the things that I didn't get involved in that I perhaps could have done, I got over here to Australia and my accountant said, buy a car park. I said, what a car park for? He said, it's a great investment. I said, I don't want a car park. Oh, buy a shopping centre. I don't want a shopping centre. He said, yeah, but buy one. I said, I don't want one. He said, what are you going to do with your money? I said, oh, I don't know, something. Of course, when you say something, it's nothing. And so, those things, they had no interest to me. But when somebody came along and said, how about you do this? It has purpose, this side business, it has purpose, it has meaning, it drives you in a direction you want to go, it aligns with your beliefs and so on and so forth. Would that work for you? Yeah, I'll do that as well. Thank you very much indeed. And that's what we've done. But when I look back over it, could I have started at 30, 35? Yeah. I could have done. And that could have made a massive difference to the way that we proceeded through life. And probably what it would have done is allowed me to leave dentistry at around about the age of 50 instead of longer. And that, once again, very quickly, if you think about the fact that it is a difficult career. We do suffer from stress. We do suffer from burnout. Our bodies suffer. Nobody tells us how toxic everything is that we suck in from the patients. And nobody tells us how the toxic environment, the emotional toxicity is, and how we have to cope with that over time. But if you give yourself a time limit and you say, I will work this business until, let's say, 50, 45, whatever it is for you, and during that time, I will make sure that I can take over and do something else, because I don't believe that dentists should be going on to 70 or even 60 or even 60.
Thank you for that. So here's the thing. This is actually the essence of why I knew this podcast would be great today, because I knew that with your perspective on life, that you'd be able to inspire some people who are in that position to make change. So here's the thing about change, right? Change occurs when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of changing, the emotional pain, because we love comfort as human beings, right? So here's the thing, right? When you understand that via staying the same, it has an outcome where you're unfulfilled, okay? You can take that mindset, you can take that realization, channel it into the present, and realize just what continuing down the path that you're unfulfilled with and unhappy with will lead to, right? And here's the thing. The pain of change, like I was saying just then, right? It's not like you have to go and jump in with 2 feet at the deep end. Just do something different and follow your heart. And I get that sounds like woo-woo advice, you know what I mean? But actually, for me, that's pretty solid, a pretty solid way to proceed, a pretty solid rationale, because it's like the dowsing rods, isn't it, right? And what have you got to lose? Because if you're doing something your whole life, you're unfulfilled, right? You only have one opportunity to change it. It's now. You can't change it in the damn rearview mirror, right? And there's another thing that I say, right? The whole point of life, right, is to have as much wisdom as possible and accrue it at the youngest age, right? Because then you have the benefits of both sides of the age, the age gap, I suppose you might call it, right? Because you've got the body of someone who's physically young, yet you have the wisdom of someone who's experienced in life, right? Okay. And that's what this podcast is about, is channeling that older version of herself, that 85-year-old version of herself, how they think, avoiding the regrets that they might potentially have, and bringing it into the present today so that we can inspire people to make change. Anything you'd like to add to that?
No, absolutely right. And I would say also the other beauty of youth is enthusiasm. I mean, enthusiasm
True,
comes from it comes from the Greek. It comes from entheos, which means God within. So it's that enthusiasm that really comes out of us. And as much as we would like to maintain that, it's you feel that it's not. It's much more difficult to maintain as you get older. And so what you do with that enthusiasm right now is you grow that whole thing. As I agree with you, you grow it all quickly, not quickly, but you grow it, and you're enthusiastic about it, and you have that vision, and you go with the vision. When you look at so you're saying about going with something, going down a path. If we can take that slightly deeper, it's really going into vision. It's what's the vision you have for your life? That significant contribution. What is it you really want to offer the community around you? What do you feel? And I use this term a lot. What's your calling in life? And when you get those, and when you know how to put that together, and I've got a beautiful, I'm not going to share it now, but a beautiful diagram on how you actually find that point, and why it's so important to find that, because you can read Sinek's book on find your why, but it's deeper than that. And I think it's that we as intelligent human beings, fairly good thinking human beings, people who've got a good brain, a good head on our shoulders, should be looking at when we're young, and then we can spread our wings and do what we really want to do. Yeah.
Beautiful. Bill, there has been a lot of wisdom imparted today. I try to keep these podcasts to about 40 minutes because I find that that's the perfect size for them to be accessible. I've been enjoying the conversation so much, as I feel that you have as well, that we're actually probably on like 50-minute mark at the moment. If we had to summarize, okay, the entire conversation that we've had in maybe like one or two concepts, what would those be for you? So I'll go mine first. I'll do mine first, and then you can hopefully that they will help you in your thought process, I suppose. So for me, first one is accountability. Okay, realize that this is not something that you can delegate, or at least delegate and obtain good results. Okay, because then you're just a statistic on somebody else's bankroll. Okay, and you're putting that money, you're channeling that money that you have into someone else's idea of an investment portfolio for you, when actually that's potentially very soulless and statistical, rather than being in any way personalized to you. It's about you, right? Taking those steps, creating the thing that's true to you, that will hopefully give you some level of remuneration, which means ultimately that you can begin to reduce your exposure to dentistry. That's the first thing, right? So accountability. And then the second thing is just to be aware that, yes, people in the financial industry, they have their place. You know, I feel like people can benefit from having a conversation with them, but also be aware that your interests and their interests are only aligned to a point. Okay, and that no one cares about numero uno as much as numero uno does. And when you educate yourself on how these things work, you're empowering yourself to do things which are fulfilling to you, as the most important person in your life, as the person that you want to prioritize, and of course be, avoid that position where you're 85 years old and you feel unfulfilled effectively.
Yeah. By the way, I'm not 85 years old. Just want to let everybody know that. Not quite.
Oh, sorry. No, I wasn't referring to you. Just to make that clear.
Yeah.
Thanks for clearing
Feel
that
it
up.
sometimes.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
suppose I'm using the 85-year-old as a little bit of a benchmark, I suppose, for someone who has been there and done that. Yeah, but
Sure.
just to be totally clear, we haven't. I don't think we've got as far as the edges, have we, Bill?
No,
But no, I wasn't presuming you were 85. Let's make that clear.
I know. I was joking there, James. I
Okay,
think there are a couple of things
good.
from my point of view. First of all, just picking up on the last thing you said, one of the things that is really important to realize, especially in your practicing life, especially if you're an associate, and that is, if you're not building your own dream, you're helping somebody else build theirs. A really important concept. That's point number one. So you want to look at your own dream and look at what you really want out of life, and not be molded by somebody else because they want you to go their direction because you're building their dream for them. So that was the first thing. The second thing is, life is not all about dentistry. And one of the mistakes I think that we often make is we come out of dental school. I know that when I came out of dental school, I thought, you know what, I'm never going to pick up another dental book. Well, that didn't work at all. I certainly did a lot of reading with CPD and so on and so forth. You have to keep researching and so on and so forth. But what I would say is, look outside dentistry for your learning. Do some real personal development stuff as well. This was stuff that I got into. I listened to you, James, and I see some of the NLP stuff that comes out and so on. And these are all things that are so important to look at. Is, how can I develop myself? What do I need to read? I mentioned Kiyosaki earlier. He was just one of the people. You can look at people like I don't know, well, nobody comes to the mind at the moment, but a lot of the greats who say, step outside and look at life. And if you do that, you start to understand yourself and what you really want, not what the system, and I'm not being controversial here, but what the system has brought us through school, through A levels or whatever they are now, and through our degree. And we're molded, but there's a time when you want to break out of that and look at your own life and what you really want to do. And a lot of that comes from reading. I know, James, you read a lot, and that's what it's all about. Yeah. And going on courses that are not dental courses. Yeah.
Lovely stuff. In essence, knowledge, right? And that was the vehicle that saved me in a way. And when I say saved, what I mean is it allowed me to be empowered to make choices that were more true to my inner energy and purpose. That's what I mean. Yeah. And I do
Yeah.
love to read. I flipping love to read. Let me just look over my shoulder here. I'm trying to think of a good book just to round this podcast up on. Here's a book that I've never read, but watched so many YouTube videos on it and talked to so many people who have read it. I feel like I have read it by proxy, okay? And it's called The Millionaire Fastlane by Jay DeMarco. And it basically describes the three fundamental ways that you can use to obtain wealth in your life. And it makes the point that fundamentally you're on one of these three paths. By default, if we don't do anything, we're on a path that's unlikely to allow us to get there. So we actually actively have to do something to be in a vehicle that suits us, to be on a path that suits our needs, right? And it's also to recognize that oftentimes for each one of us, there's no ideal path. But once you're aware of the three, you have to pick one, almost for lack of a better option, if you truly are serious about getting to the point where you've obtained wealth. That's a neat synopsis of the book. If you read it or watch a load of YouTube videos on it, like how I've done, I feel like it was something very seminal that I literally think about every day. That's a good wealth book. Let me pick another book on something a little bit wider than wealth. I'll pick the Almanac of Naval Ravikant, which is all about philosophy, wisdom, thoughts, and reflections on life. Bill, thanks so much for your time today. It's been a wonderful podcast. Where can people find out more about you?
Oh, that's a very good question. Um, Basically, you can find me on Facebook, actually. It's the place at the moment that you'll find me most easily.
Bill Kellner-Read, he is on the Dennis Who Invest Facebook group, of course. Feel free to reach out to anybody who was listening today. Bill, thank you so much for your time and for staying up late all the way over in Australia. I'm sure we'll speak again very soon.
Thanks, James. Bye for now. Bye-bye.